Gabriella, pregnant and abandoned, found herself compelled to return to her parents' home. However, her father was determined not to let the family's reputation be tarnished. In an agreement with a wealthy farmer, he forced Gabriella into an arranged marriage. The surprising reasons that led the farmer to accept this marriage would leave Gabriella amazed and puzzled. Gabriella, at 19 years old, lived in a small town where time seemed to have stopped. Her father, a strict and controlling man, held a tight grip over her life. Gabriella felt trapped, like a caged bird yearning for the open sky. But in the midst of this suffocating routine, Lau appeared, a young man with deep eyes and a captivating smile, who entered Gabriella's life like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. They crossed paths by chance in a local cafe, and the flame of passion quickly ignited. As their eyes met and their hands touched, they knew they were destined for something greater. Gabriella felt alive like never before, and Lau, with his free spirit, offered her a glimpse of a world where rules weren't so strict. Together, they began to devise a daring plan, an escape from watchful eyes and oppressive rules that limited the love they felt for each other. It was the escape of two lovers in search of experiencing a great love. Gabriella's father, a well-known farmer in the region, had specific plans for his daughter. He saw her as the future wife of some young local farmer, destined to live a quiet life filled with family responsibilities. Gabriella's dreams, however, were different. She longed for something more, a true love that would make her feel complete and adventures that would take her beyond the boundaries of that small town. The dark night marked the beginning of Gabriella and Lau's escape. With their hearts racing, they left the small town, leaving behind the shadows of the life they knew. Lau had a friend in a nearby town who offered them temporary shelter. It was a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and silence, where they could finally be free. The first few days after the escape felt like a dream for the passionate couple. Every moment together was like a fairy tale, and the feeling of freedom filled their hearts. But reality soon began to set in. Without prior experience, finding jobs proved to be a challenging task. Lau eventually found work as a construction assistant on a local site. The days were long and exhausting, and the harshness of the work took a toll on his body and mind. Then one day, Gabriella made a discovery that would change everything. She found out she was pregnant. The discovery of her pregnancy was indeed a turning point in the couple's life. Lau, already struggling to support both of them, became deeply upset. The idea of adding a baby to the equation was overwhelming, and fear and financial pressure consumed him. On a day that began like any other, Lau left for work, but this time, he simply didn't come back home. Gabriella was left desperate and alone with no options. The promise of a future together had crumbled, and harsh reality had torn them apart. The young woman, with a broken heart and a baby on the way, faced a difficult choice. With no other alternative, Gabriella had to make the painful journey back to her parents' house. Upon learning of her pregnancy and Lau's abandonment, Gabriella's father was filled with fury. His anger was palpable, and the words that came from his lips were as sharp as blades. "You've dragged this family's name through the mud. You're a disgrace to me," her father said bitterly. "I will handle this matter." And with those words, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. A few hours later, her father returned with a renewed spirit, surprising Gabriella and her mother. His voice sounded excited as he exclaimed, "Open the finest wine from the cellar. I have news." Gabriella, still confused by the unexpected turn of events, joined her father and mother in the dining room. They filled their wine glasses, the young woman still unsure of what they were toasting to. Her father looked at Gabriella with an enigmatic smile on his face before making the toast. "Today is a day of redemption," her father continued, his gaze steady. "Gabriella took the path of rebellion and mistake, but she will have a second chance. Today, we toast to Gabriella's marriage to the prosperous farmer, Mao." Gabriella felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. She was stunned, not knowing how to react to this unexpected twist in her life. "Dad, but I'm pregnant," Gabriella whispered, seeking a last glimmer of understanding from her father. He looked at her with a firm gaze and replied, "He knows, and he will raise your child as his own. The deal is already done. The wedding is in 15 days. We need to act quickly before your belly starts to grow." A dinner was organized for Gabriella and Mao to get to know each other and formalize their engagement. The house was impeccably decorated, and the table was filled with delicious dishes and expensive wines. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but Gabriella was filled with insecurities inside. Mao's arrival was indeed a surprise for Gabriella. She had expected an older, more experienced man, but she found herself facing a young man of about 30 years old, with a serious expression and a distant gaze. Throughout the dinner, Gabriella's father took charge of the conversations, enthusiastically sharing stories about the glorious past of his farm. Mao, on the other hand, remained silent, nodding occasionally. He was a man of few words, and this added to Gabriella's discomfort. As the dinner came to an end, Mao took a ring out of his pocket and offered it to Gabriella as a way to formalize their engagement. She looked at the ring, shiny and imposing. With a sigh, Gabriella accepted the ring, knowing she had no other option at that moment. The wedding day finally arrived, but it was not the fairy tale Gabriella had dreamed of. The ceremony was simple and formal, with few guests and an air of formality. Mao, the groom, maintained his serious and distant expression throughout the entire ceremony. He couldn't even muster a smile for the photos. His presence was imposing, but also intimidating. The first night at Mao's farm after the wedding was a moment of deep confusion for Gabriella. She was nervous, feeling completely out of her element. They were two strangers who now shared a house and a life, but seemed to live in completely different worlds. Maro, with his serious and distant expression, showed Gabriella around the house, guiding her through the rooms and facilities. He led her to her room, wished her a good night, and went to his own room without many words. Gabriella was confused, with many questions swirling in her mind. Why had this man agreed to marry her? What did he expect from this arranged marriage? The silence of that first night echoed in her room as she lay down, reflecting on the choices that had brought her to this point. Days passed at Maro's farm, each of them following their own routine. While Maro dedicated his time to farm business, taking care of transactions and purchasing supplies, Gabriella began to explore the vast house. Curiosity led her to search every corner of the property until she came across a locked door. Determined to uncover the mystery behind that locked door, Gabriella tried every key she found in the house until one finally fit the lock. She turned the key slowly and pushed the door, revealing a room with some furniture piled up and dusty boxes. Gabriella began to investigate the contents of the boxes. As she removed the dusty objects, she unraveled the past that was stored there. Her expression became confused and worried. Gabriella found photo albums that told the story of Maro with another woman. The pictures captured her now husband in happy moments with a beautiful young lady. The photographs showed their wedding, dinners, and parties held in that house, revealing a life Morrow had once lived. Gabriella felt her heart tighten when she found a photo that made her pause. It was an image of the pregnant woman with a glow in her eyes that only motherhood could bring. The revelation that Morrow had been married and that his ex-wife was pregnant added an additional layer of complexity to her understanding of her new husband. The question of where that woman might be still lingered in Gabriella's mind when suddenly she was surprised by Morrow's arrival in the room. His expression was intense and angry, as if he was furious about Gabriella's discovery. "What are you doing here? This is supposed to stay locked," he said with a powerful and irritated voice, clearly upset by Gabriella's intrusion. Feeling cornered and disoriented, Gabriella quickly apologized and hastily left the room as Morrow closed the door decisively. During dinner that evening, silence hung heavily over the table. Finally, after a long period of quietness, Morrow decided to break the tension. "I'm sorry, Gabriella, for yelling at you earlier," he began, his expression revealing a mixture of regret and sadness. "It's just that room holds a painful part of my past." "It's okay, Morrow," she began gently, "but there's something that intrigues me. Why did you agree to marry me?" Morrow looked at Gabriella for a moment, pondering his words. His expression was serious, and he seemed to choose his words carefully before responding. "Your father owed me a large sum of money, and as payment, he offered me to marry you," confessed Morrow, his voice filled with regret. "I'm not proud of the deal I made, and there were times when I thought about backing out, but I ended up going through with it. There's also another detail that made me agree." At this moment, Morrow hesitated, as if recounting the next part was painful for him. Gabriella watched him with empathy, waiting to hear the continuation. It's been a year since I lost my wife and my son during childbirth," Morrow continued in a softer tone, his eyes reflecting the pain of his loss. "And when I found out you were pregnant, something stirred within me." Morrow's confession brought a new understanding to Gabriella. She realized there was more than just a business obligation behind their marriage, but also the shadow of a personal tragedy that had marked Morrow's life. After the revelation of the truths about their marriage and the tragedy that had affected Morrow in the past, the relationship between him and Gabriella began to transform. The initial tension gave way to a growing friendship and camaraderie. They started having deeper conversations during dinner, sharing their stories and dreams. Gabriella, now more involved in farm life, began to accompany Morrow in his tasks, learning about property management activities. As Gabriella's belly grew with the imminent arrival of the baby, Morrow also seemed increasingly involved in plans for the child's future. He showed interest and concern for Gabriella's well-being, attending her medical appointments and offering his unconditional support. These moments of camaraderie and the building of a deeper bond started to turn their marriage into something more than just an obligation. The birth of the baby was a moment of profound emotion and transformation in Gabriella and Morrow's lives. Morrow was present throughout the labor process, and from the moment he saw the baby, the connection he felt with the child was undeniable. He didn't consider the fact that it wasn't his blood. To Morrow, that baby was his child, and his love for him was unconditional. At this point in the story, there was no denying that Gabriella and Morrow were in love. One day, Morrow prepared a surprise for Gabriella, organizing a romantic and carefully planned dinner. As candles lit the table and the food exuded delicious aromas, Morrow looked into Gabriella's eyes. "This time it's for real. he said with a voice filled with tenderness. "Gabriella, I love you. Would you marry me?" Without hesitation, Gabriella accepted Maro's proposal with a radiant smile. Finally, she was living the love story she had always wished for. Over the years, Maro and Gabriella built a family, having more children who filled the farm with laughter and joy. They faced challenges together and celebrated life's joys, living a deep and enduring love on that farm. Gabriella and Maro began their marriage under initial circumstances that seemed misguided, driven by family obligations and agreements. But what started as a forced union soon turned into a beautiful love story. They discovered that true love can flourish amidst challenges and adversity.